All right, so here we are back in our test level with our character that can walk around and our camera system that's very rudimentary. And rather than flesh that out, which might make sense, like I said, right now we're gonna kind of take a U-turn and work on a little messaging system just to help drive home this observer pattern stuff. And maybe we'll wind up using it as we go forward. So the first thing we need to do, since the vision for this feature is like imagine if you're playing a Mario game and you fail a bunch of times in a row and then it gives you a hint. That would be a contextual hint system. Or it could be something more trigger based, which is what we're going to do here, where like let's say you walk up to the edge of the world. We could say, be careful, if you fall off, we haven't implemented respawn and you'll have to start the whole game over. Something like that. Or it could be something like, if the player stays in an area for too long, we might assume that they don't know what to do and we give them a hint. Or it could warn them about this ice or explain it, something like that. So there's a lot of scenarios where we may want to deliver to our player some sort of contextual hint message. Because these hint messages are going to take the form of text on the screen, we need to add the Ttextmesh Pro stuff to our project. And Ttextmesh Pro is just a newer way to render text in your Unity projects that is crisper and has more features than the old standard text. So what we're going to do in order to get Ttextmesh Pro going in our project is we are going to right click on our scene and we're going to go to the game object menu here. We're going to go to UI and we're going to choose Text-Ttextmesh Pro. There's actually a lot of ways you could do this. You could go to the game object menu and do it, but this is one way and they're all equivalent. So once you first try it, you'll get this little message. It used to be you needed to actually import the Ttextmesh Pro package before you could even do what I just did. Nowadays, it looks like that's built in, but once you try to use Ttextmesh Pro for the first time, you get this dialog box that says you need to import the essentials. So just go ahead and click the import button. I'm not going to bother with the examples and extras, but you could check it out if you wanted. And once you've got it imported, I'm just going to save my scene real quick, and I'm going to go to GitHub. And because we're trying to, do this code review, remember we're on our new branch here. It's important that we, you can see importing those essentials created like tons of files. And these are files where there's nothing I could have done wrong. This is just stuff Unity imported. And so in order to ease the burden on whoever has to review our stuff, we don't want to make real changes that need review in the midst of this import here, because it's going to be a pain for the reviewer to search out which one of these files is actually a real change and which is just an automatic thing that has no chance of being wrong. So it's a really good habit to, anytime you import a package into your project, to make that its own commit. Trust me, you don't want to have to sort through 74 files when you're a code reviewer. So before we go any further, we're just going to say import Ttextmesh Pro essentials. But you could just say import Ttextmesh Pro if you wanted. And really, I did change my scene file here because I added that canvas. So what I'm going to do in order to make life really nice for my reviewer is I'm going to uncheck that. So I'm not going to commit that change as part of this big import commit. So let's go ahead and commit the Ttextmesh Pro stuff, which is everything else, because that's all I've done. It's really important that you haven't done other stuff yet. If so, you want to get that all squared away and then make your new branch. And so we will go ahead and commit this. Might take a sec because there's 70 of them. And you'll notice we've never published this branch. So our typical push button has been replaced with this publish button, because that just means that on our repository, if you click the repository menu and you hit view on GitHub, you're not going to see this contextual message trigger branch. It doesn't exist online yet. So I have to actually publish this thing. And so clicking publish will not just only publish the branch, but it'll also push all our commit that we had. And now if I go to repository, view on GitHub, we can see that there's some new branches. Now I actually have 3 branches because I've been kind of prototyping and planning my videos in a branch called development and then doing it in the master branch. But now I have this new branch that you should have too, based on this new feature that we're adding. It's called contextual message trigger. And so you can click it and you can see a branch has everything that, the project had from the point where we branched off, plus now it has our one new commit that we added. And so if we look at the commits, you'll see all of the stuff from master plus this one new commit. But if we were to switch to master, you will see all the same stuff except for that one new commit. So anyway, just a little demonstration of how you can navigate branches on GitHub. So now that we have that branch pushed, let's go back to GitHub Desktop, and here we could save this scene. I don't know. All I've done in this change here is add the Ttextmesh Pro and the canvas to my test scene. So just to show you that whenever you add a UI element, something in this UI submenu, if you don't already have a canvas, Unity is going to add one for you. It's also going to add this event system. And the event system is important for like input events and things of that nature to get your UI to work. So you kind of just have to have this unless you create your own implementation. And that's why it comes in automatically. And then the Ttextmesh Pro text is like UI text that should appear on the screen. That has to live, all of the UI stuff has to live on a canvas game object. So if you don't have one of those yet, it'll automatically make it for you. And I guess before I commit this, I want to get it set up how I want. So at this point, you can take a look at your game window and you'll see your text there. You can see it in the scene view too if you were to double click your canvas, and you'll see it's like this giant rectangle. It exists in a different coordinate space than your regular gameplay. Our world is down there. That's the world space, and it has its own XYZ coordinate system. The canvas, you can see, is set up in screen space, meaning it's mapped to my screen. So actually I'm going to say something and I don't even remember the right answer, but I think 0, 0 is like over here, or maybe it's down here in the bottom left. I can't remember. Sorry. You can look it up easily though. But the idea is that, 1 is all the way over or on the X, and 1 is all the way up to the top on the Y. Something like that. So it's its own distinct space, and that's why these numbers up here may not match with what your expectations are based on the world space down there. If you look at the game window, you can see I'm in 16:9, which is going to be important. You want to get your resolution defined before you start testing UI that's supposed to happen in the screen space, or you're going to be in for some headaches at the end of the day when you actually test on your target device and nothing looks the way you thought it was going to be. There's ways to make your UI responsive, I guess you could say, so that it moves around based on the window size in a way that looks good. But that's outside of the needs for almost every game, because most of our games are all happening on the same kind of screen every time, whether it's a TV or a phone or whatever. So our game, we're going to operate under the assumption that it's going to be on a TV or a 16 by 9 screen of some sort. And so just make sure you have 16 by 9 picked before you start arranging your UI. That's just a great thing to remember. And then the other big tip I will give you, that what I like to do as a best practice for UI, because I know what my resolution is going to be when I start, I like to choose scale with screen size. So if you select your canvas, you'll see there's a canvas scaler component by default, and you can pick scale with screen size, and you have to give it a reference resolution. Now this is, I think, like a 4:3 aspect ratio, so we need to change that right off the bat. And so what I normally do is just use the standard like 1080p, so that would be 1920 pixels by 1080 pixels. And now I have a setup here so that however I get it to look here, it's going to look consistent on a variety of 16 by 9 displays. So I can feel safe that if I get it looking good here, it'll look good on my TV or my phone or whatever, as long as it's 16 by 9. All right. So now that I have these changes in place, let's go back to our scene view, and it's going to be useful to deal with our canvas in this 2D mode, because the screen is 2D. So you can see now in this context a big white outline. It's kind of like the same as you can see our camera frustum all the way from way down there where our camera lives. This is similar. It's like a camera that's showing the screen only. And as I move things around, like if I want this to be in the top left, I would move it over there, and then you'll notice it's in the top left in the game view. What I'm going to do is use the anchor stuff here, the anchor presets. So the canvas objects have a rect transform, which is a little different because the screen space is different, and they try to set up a system to allow you to create responsive designs and things like that. That's what the anchors are for. But what we're going to use it for is to just quickly move our stuff to a spot relative to our screen. So I want it to be in this like top middle, like up here, but I also want it to stretch all the way across the screen. So what I can do is, you can see it says hold Alt, also set position. So I'm going to hold Alt, and I'm going to choose this option right here, which will move it to the top and stretch it out so it takes up the entire screen's width. And now you can see that that has happened. And next, I want to make this font more legible. You can see it's pretty small. So what we will do is just, it's going to be maybe useful to be able to see the game window while I make some of these changes. So I'm going to drag it out on its own right now. And I'm going to start dragging my font size up until I think it's about what I might want it to be. So how about like 60 seems good. And I don't like how it's like right up on the very edge of the screen. There's a concept called a safe zone when you're dealing with UI, because back in the day, like TVs were all a little kind of different, and if you put something in the corner, there's a chance it could get cut off. So we want to add a little bit of margins here, which let's see, where is margins? It looks like you have to click this extra settings, click to expand, and now I can see my margins. So I'm just going to click and drag, and you can see, okay, what looks kind of good. Maybe like 50 pixels from the left and 50 pixels from the top. That's pretty good. And There's also this problem where, so like if I run the game right now, that text is going to be fixed on the screen and it looks good as long as it's over like a darker background. But if I get over something lighter, it becomes much harder to read. So what we can do is add an outline to it. So with the normal Unity text, there used to be an outline component, which is pretty cool. But with Ttextmesh Pro, the way that this works is you want to use a different material that has an outline. So there's like a whole process for creating new font assets with Ttextmesh Pro. You can look that up. Maybe one day I'll make a video for it, but I think there's a pretty solid tutorial, so I'm not going to cover that ground, and we're just making little prototypes, so the default is fine. But it does come in with a different material option for one that includes an outline. And if you look down here at the material settings, and there's a shader here, and you can see it has outline checked. If you were to just like, if I change this, it's going to change every instance of my font that's using this material. So you have to be careful. It's not based on instances of text that you've created like in your hierarchy. This happens everywhere. It's a material change. So that's why they give you some of these by default, so that if you change the default one by, say, adding an outline, it doesn't add an outline to every single text in your game. It only adds, you want to have like a separate material that has the outline and a separate material that has the shadow, and so on and so forth. So anyway, it looks like it's a pretty thin outline. I can start increasing it just to your taste. And again, the goal would be that when you run the game, you can see your text when it's over a light background or a dark background. So that's what we're going for. All right, and now let's like rename this object. Instead of text, let's call it contextual message text. And instead of just leaving the default new text in here, this is, let's just make it clear what this is. We can say contextual message area, something like that. And then it'll give us an idea of what it's going to look like with a longer message. Now, you might notice sometimes your text doesn't show up if it is out of the bounds of this yellow area. And that's controlled by these settings where it talks about overflow and wrapping. So overflow is if it goes out of the little yellow boundary, this little rectangle that my text is meant to live in, will it show up? If you hit truncate, it will not. If you hit overflow, it will. And related is this idea of wrapping, and that's just like what's going to happen if I go all the way like around the horn, right? Is it gonna give me a new line that will be wrapping, or we can just cut it off with disabled? So anyway, that's the deal. You could alternatively add like a content size fitter to make this fit, this rectangular boundary fit the size of your text content, but in our little limited example, that's not going to be necessary. But it can be in a lot of UI scenarios where things are changing based on their parents, etc. All right, so I've got a pretty good general setup here for this. Let's go ahead and save our scene, and now I'm going to commit, and you'll see we've got our outline material has been changed. Just to be safe, you might want to hit save project too. Sometimes some of these material changes don't happen unless you hit that. And we have a quality settings change. I don't know why. It's something about Ttextmesh Pro, I guess. So what I'm going to do here is we'll say we added contextual message text and canvas with canvas scalar setup, something like that. So make sure your scene is saved too. And we will make this commit. Make sure you're on the right branch, and we will push it. And we're going to get in the habit of every time we make a meaningful chunk of progress, like essentially at the end of each video, we're going to make a commit and push it. So that's going to mark the end of this video, and we'll move on to the next work next.